Former President Trump is back in court, hoping to deliver part of closing arguments in the civil fraud trial that could dismantle his business empire. This after a court official tells ABC News the judge overseeing the case received a bomb threat at his home this morning. Police are now calling that a swatting incident. The judge has already ruled the former president inflated his net worth to secure key business deals. Trump called the case politically motivated. Now attorneys and maybe Trump himself will make their final case, hoping to sway the judge on what penalties Trump, his family, and their business should face. We know the former president is already in that courthouse, and we are now waiting to see him appear and go into the actual courtroom. I've got executive editorial producer John Santucci with me, legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer, and of course there is former President Trump right now. Let's listen.
We consider this an unconstitutional witch hunt. It's election interference at the highest level. It's a disgrace. It's in coordination with the White House and Joe Biden because you can't win a campaign fairly. And we're going through it, but it is indeed a terrible witch hunt. We're going to have a news conference a little bit later on. As you know, I want to speak. I want to make the summation. At this moment, the judge is not letting me make the summation because I'll bring up things that he doesn't want to hear. And it's a very unfair trial. Nobody's seen anything like this. I don't think they've ever seen anything like this. We have a situation where a statute was used that doesn't give me a jury, so I have no jury. I really have no rights, and it's and nobody thinks it's constitutional. People, legal scholars are writing about it like it's something they've never seen before. So it's interference. It's political interference. And it's something that shouldn't be allowed. So I am hoping to speak and to help my lawyers reveal all of the defects of this case that should have never been brought. Very, very strong financial statements. They thought it was the opposite. They had no idea because I'm a private company. Then they saw them knocking their socks off. They couldn't believe it. But great financial statements. Everything is good. We have a level of detail in our defense that nobody's ever had. This is a case that should have never been brought, and it was brought. And it's very unfair, and it's very bad for New York State. Companies are fleeing, people are fleeing, the streets are crime-ridden, and Letitia James, that's all she thinks about is get Trump. She's been dreaming about it for years, and it's, you know, it's not the way a state should be run. Because this is a state that's been in big trouble. You have all the businesses fleeing, and you have the people fleeing. The people that pay taxes. People that don't pay taxes are coming in, so that's not what you want. So I want to thank you. We're going to have a news conference today around, we don't know the time, we'll notify you, but sometime in the early afternoon at 40 Wall Street. So we'll give a news conference where we can actually speak and have a microphone here, because even that they don't want us to have. They really don't want us to speak too much. So we'll see whether or not the judge allows me to speak. Perhaps he won't, but I certainly would like to. Thank you very much.
Former President Trump entering a New York City courtroom where he is hoping to make part of the closing arguments in the civil fraud trial against him. Our investigative correspondent, Aaron Kaczorski, is outside that courtroom, and I'm joined here in studio by executive editorial producer John Santucci and ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer for more. Aaron, we're hearing former President Trump saying that he wants to give at least part of the closing arguments today. He doesn't know if the judge is going to allow him to. What's the latest on that back and forth?
Well, we're going to wait to see what Judge Arthur Engoron wants to do, because in order to allow Trump to give a closing argument himself, which is a highly irregular move for a defendant in a case who's represented by his own attorneys, and Trump has plenty of them, the judge said Trump needed to agree to certain limitations, the same way an attorney giving a closing statement is limited to discussing the evidence admitted at trial. He wanted Trump to agree to stick to the relevant material facts entered into evidence and not to make a campaign speech out of this and not to impugn the judge, his staff, or the court. A number of deadlines had come and gone, and finally at noon yesterday, Diane, the judge said Trump never responded, never agreed to the conditions, so he said he's assuming Trump is not going to be speaking today. But you heard Trump just there saying he hopes to be able to deliver part of the defense closing argument himself. We'll see if the judge allows it.
Brian, what do you make of this as a legal strategy?
It's not one. I mean, many times my clients have asked, hey, can I give part of the closing argument, or can I even speak during sentencing? And oftentimes in sentencing, that works. For me, this is a unique situation because he's already been found liable. And so for the most part, this trial is in some ways like a sentencing. We're trying to decide how much, if at all, he's going to be fined or the company's going to be fined. So to some extent, I do agree. Let Donald Trump go and give part of the closing argument. But he has to be constrained to the same requirements, as Aaron said, that I would have as a defense attorney making a closing argument or anyone else. But as we saw just now, he's going to talk about how bad the state is, how Letitia James is handling this, the streets of New York. He can't stay on one topic long enough to make a coherent argument. I don't see how he's going to do it in the court.
John, how important is this to Trump to be able to give this statement on his own, or is part of it the ability to argue that they won't let him?
Well, part of it is the ability to say that, you know, they're shutting me down. They're not providing me an opportunity they would give to anybody else because they're out to get me. So it plays into the campaign narrative for sure. But look, as we talked about earlier, Diane, this is all personal to him because even though he mentioned it himself, so I'm not breaking any embargoes here, he said he wants to give a press conference at 40 Wall Street. That's one of the buildings he owns in Manhattan. If this case is ruled against him and he's thrown out of business in New York, 40 Wall Street is no longer a Trump property anymore if this case ends up holding with the ruling. So all of this is deeply personal to Donald Trump at the end of the day. So thus, for himself, he looks around, he looks at, you know, the messenger. He's often said, you know, he's his own communications director, his own spokesperson. In his mind, who's better to defend Donald Trump than Donald Trump?
Aaron, Trump said today, he said it a number of times, that this is a political persecution, and he said today outside that courtroom that this was done in collusion with President Biden, that this is a political move by President Biden to carry on with this case. Is there any evidence of that, Aaron?
No, there's not. This is a state case. It was brought by Letitia James, who is a Democrat and who did, as Trump frequently says, campaign to get Trump. That part's true. But before the trial began, well before the trial began, Trump tried to argue that it should be thrown out because of the political statements that Letitia James made when she was running to be New York Attorney General, and those arguments failed. So the case has been legitimately brought by the state. The judge has already ruled in a partial summary judgment that Trump inflated his net worth by as much as $2.2 billion, and that enabled him to get better terms on bank loans than he otherwise deserved. And now the question is how much the penalty should be. The Attorney General is seeking $370 million in what's called disgorgement, the amount that she believes Trump should be forced to pay based on ill-gotten gains, as she's calculated them. And as John Santucci alluded to, she also wants to shut him out of New York real estate, which could have significant consequences for all the buildings around here that have Trump's name on it. Just today, in fact, Diane, Trump's name is coming off his golf course in the Bronx, and it's going to be replaced by Bally's because the city of New York no longer wanted to do business with Trump and have him operate that golf course in the Bronx after January 6th. So there's a lot of movement with Trump anyway, but this particular civil case does have the power to effectively put him out of business in New York if the judge agrees.
So, Brian, what are you watching for in these closing arguments?
What issues are going to arise in the closing arguments that can create an appellate issue or an argument for a stay? Because at this point, he's already lost in many regards. We don't know the loss in terms of a dollar amount, but we know the loss in terms of the ability to do business in New York. So what I expect to see is after this case, however it resolves, there's going to be a stay, meaning that he'll ask a higher judge to stay the decision here so they can still operate and do business as they walk through that appeal. How many issues are going to come up during that appeal on closing arguments is what I'm looking for to see how this next step is going to progress. All
right. Brian Buckmeyer, John Santucci, Aaron Katursky, thank you all.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.